You see this ball joint right here? Well, imagine if this was currently on your vehicle, but you didn't know it because the boot was covering it. Obviously, the boot's missing in this case, and the question is, how did it even get to be in this condition? Well, we'll get to that, but to find out, it is very important to do a thorough inspection of your vehicle every time you service it, so you can find these issues before they get to be this bad. Maybe when you're driving your vehicle, you hear a strange clunking or thumping over bumps. Maybe you see uneven tire wear as you're walking around your vehicle, but just on one corner, on one wheel. Or maybe you feel that the vehicle feels different than it used to, like maybe it's loose or maybe it pulls or, just a strange feeling that shouldn't be there. Well, it's all for a reason. Usually it doesn't just happen out of nowhere. Typically what you would do, you would raise the front or rear end of the vehicle based on where you have the problem, and you just give the wheel a little shake up and down, left and right, checking for play. Now, if everything feels tight, but you're seeing all or any of those symptoms, well, there's still a problem. For me, I know I have at least one of those issues, and there is no play in this wheel. So that is a reason to dig in further. So let's remove the wheel and see where the problem's coming from. Now that we got the wheel off to dig in some more, remember that oneauto.com has the front end kits that you need to get your vehicle back on the road safely. With the wheel off, we can much better inspect the situation we have going on here, and right off the bat, I'm seeing that this upper ball joint boot has some cracks in it, kind of like a split that goes all along. Could that be an indication? Yes. Has it failed just by looking at that? No, but it's on its way. However, if you look further, just follow the boot along, because you can't just look at half of it. On the back, we see a giant split. That is wide open, and it's probably been like that for a while. So that is definitely a problem. Now, further investigation tells me that this is probably worn out, and to see if it has any play, the correct way to do it on these upper control arms that are being pulled down by the knuckle, because the spring is pushing everything down, is to stick a pry bar right through the spring or the frame, but regardless where you put it, you want to pry down on that upper control arm. And that's quite a bit of play. The reason that the wheel didn't show that when I moved it back and forth is because right now this upper control arm has good bushings still that are pulling it up. The knuckle is being pushed down by the strut, which means two forces are opposed to each other trying to pull this ball joint apart. Now, because the suspension's drooping down and it's hanging, this being on the lift, me moving the wheel and the tire was not enough force to show that movement. A little bit of leverage though, right on that upper ball joint, did the trick and exposed our issue. Even if you think you found the issue, continue looking, because it doesn't mean it's the only issue. So check your lower ball joint, check your tie rods, wheel bearing, anything that moves in the front end or even the rear end of a vehicle needs to be tight, because if it's loose, it will have consequences, really. So what can happen is, especially with our ball joint situation, you can hear some clunking over bumps as you drive. That's what it's going to result in. If it gets bad enough, or if it's combined with other loose parts, it'll feel like the front end is loose, especially at higher speeds. That's, of course, unsafe. And it can cause uneven tire wear, because now that it's affected the alignment, the wheels aren't perfectly straight or parallel anymore. As you can see in this shot right here, we have two tires that they were put on at the same time. They are the same tire from the same vehicle, but one is worn out, the other one is still in great shape. So that's a clear indication that there's a problem. And as you can see over here, this was a tire that was on the front of a pickup truck with loose components. This is what's called really bad chopping of the tire, where it looks like it has peaks and valleys. That is another clear indication of loose components in the front end that requires you to check further. Because of this setup, we have to remove the strut in order to get the control arm out, and that happens on many vehicles with upper control arms actually. So let's get all this apart, take the control arm out. Right here are both control arms, the old one and the new one, and you can see now that we can compare just how bad the old one was. Obviously, we have this giant split right here, which isn't supposed to be here, because inside of the ball joint is supposed to be clean grease. No water, no sand, no debris, none of that. So it can work properly for a long time. That's exactly how this one is, of course. Nice brand new, soft, pliable boot. And the boot is crucial to the operation of this ball joint because if it's no longer sealed up, where in there is supposed to just be clean grease, no water, no debris, none of that, just clean grease, just like in this new one, well, now water and debris, sand, whatever elements were around, got in and damaged that ball joint by contaminating the grease or maybe even washing it out if it's water, and it can no longer do its job properly. So it doesn't have to be a giant split like this, it can actually just be a little tear. That's enough to let the grease leak out and the elements right in. That compromises the ball joint. In here, because of this split, we have water that washed out the grease, sand and debris that got in there and made it all dried up, which therefore wore down the insides of the ball joint. And unfortunately, in this case, well, maybe fortunately, we cannot replace just the ball joint. We have to do the whole control arm and ball joint assembly. And that's why I said fortunately, because for me, in this high mileage truck, I get new bushings with it, which is great. So I got myself the kit of 2 control arms from oneauto.com, so I can do both sides. That way, once both are done, and the truck is gonna ride evenly left and right, I can get one alignment and not worry about these failing in the near future. I took the boot off of this upper control arm, which is now in my vise, cleaned off the grease, and you can see when I move this just how much play it really had. That's side to side, by the way. And now up and down. As previously mentioned, none of that is supposed to happen. Time to get the new control arm installed. I got this control arm replaced, already did the other side, so this truck's good to go. You saw me torquing these bolts for the upper control arm bushings with a pry bar through it, and that is so that I can support it approximately at right height. Because if you don't do that, and the control arm's either all the way up or all the way down, when you put the truck back on the ground and it's loaded under its own weight, you actually can tear the control arm bushings prematurely by putting them in a bind permanently, and you want to avoid that, so torque them at right height. And of course, with any steering or suspension components, you want to get an alignment at the end when you're done replacing them so that the truck can drive straight down the road and you don't get uneven tire wear.